Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH3501, and this is the overview video summary of the topics we'll be covering in the 16th lecture, which I've entitled Ethnographic Analysis. This has been a bit of a kind of evolving kind of process with thinking about this, and I'm drawing on the work I've done on my PhD thesis, which, fingers crossed, is sufficiently robust to be able to share. And what I want to do this week is demonstrate how ethnographic principles, which the communication for change model is founded on, which is proposed by Lenny and Tashi, is something which is grounded in practical experience and has valuable, we can draw and learn valuable lessons from the process of ethnographic engagement, which we can't get from other forms of data collection, if you like. So the first thing to do is kind of look at the idea of a practice-based study. So I'll talk through the study that I worked on for my PhD thesis, which is a study of community media groups in Leicester a few years ago now, but it's still relevant, I think. And then I'll talk about the way that I used Herbert Blumer as a way to evaluate the process of participation in that. Once I'd extracted and collected the data, I could then look at the idea, well, what is participation about in this process, and what are the kind of frameworks, if you like. So one of the things that Bloomer discusses is that separation of cause from effect, is that don't mistake and don't conflate those things that you see with what are your imagined causes, that we have to use empirical analysis to build up a picture of what the actual cause and effect is, rather than what the hypothesized cause and effect model might be. So this is an inductive rather than a deductive process of thinking and engaging. And what we've got to do on that basis then is to look at social situations as they're practiced and lived, the kind of life worlds, what it is that people actually do, and what it is that motivates people in terms of what drives the process of change, what motivates a sense of continuity, how do people respond to change, and those things which are not fixed and those things which are fixed. It's kind of is there any kind of sense of coercion in this process, or is it something which is a range of social factors that kind of play out and interact, which in one circumstance might be very different from a relatively similar set of scenarios and circumstances, but they play out in a completely different way. So what we don't want to do is try and prejudge what is effective and what is not affected. So we're situating our observations in practical experience. And to do this, we look at, or I looked at, the way that Herbert Blumer identifies the entry into group life. And he used examples based on industrialization. So these can be adapted and developed in terms of things like job opportunities. Now, in community media, if you wanted to become the leader or the person in charge of a community media project, a community radio station or newspaper, what kind of careers advice would you get? Where would you fill out job applications? What would it be that you need to know? What are the best skills? If you want to be a school teacher, there's a very fixed pathway that you can go down, and there's qualifications and there's status and there's experience that you can get as you work through the cycle of professional development, and it leads to being a teacher or beyond, a head teacher or beyond. But with community media, it doesn't play out in that way. So we've got to think about and look at what the kind of way that people do enact these things. What are the roles that people enact, and how are they enacted in their local circumstances, and what's the kind of frameworks that they are expressed through, if you like. Where do interest groups, where do people form links due to common identified need, and where do interest groups, communities of interest emerge through association and through pleasure and fun as opposed to need. These are all quite important, and how does this work in practice? Because there's no fixed pathway and there's no automatic way to say that a community media group must develop along these lines or it must be applied in this way. You have to be attuned to the local circumstances in terms of what enables people to operate and undertake activities within community media environment. Now, I'm going to bombard you with notes. You're used to this now, I know, but I'm going to bombard you with lots of notes because I've kind of truncated them myself. But I think it's it's useful. We'll look through some examples, not all questions, but there's a lot of questions that are there's a detailed. This is a very rich way of thinking about community media that can paint a very detailed, descriptive kind of picture, which shows that community media operates on multiple levels, and that the relationships that people manage and the relationships and the sense of identity that people express are formed through a multiplicity of different factors. And what makes that sustainable, again, is a multiplicity of different factors which need to be taken into account. So the methodology that we use to look at these situations as they emerge are incredibly important. And then, well, what do we draw from it in terms of inferences and in terms of ideas and themes, and in terms of what it is that people achieve with community media? So we've identified, and we've stated this earlier on, that people are goal driven, and that's really where I think we should focus our attention, is understanding what drives people, what is the people's motivation, what is people's drive to social and civic and communal engagement and individual fulfillment, and what are the factors that drive that, and what are the factors that people have to adapt to and change to and see in relative positions against and negotiate, which is the basis for symbolic interactionism, is that the meaning process, or the process of finding the world meaningful, is an individual process, but it's a process that's negotiated in a social setting. And it's something which isn't fixed or determined by that setting, but it's something which emerges from the creative application of our intelligence and our thought processes and our social engagement processes. And and what we've really got to do is kind of look at the way that we redescribe the world and the way that we engage with the world through the current frames of language that we use at the moment. Now, there's a lot of notes on this, and I'm not suggesting that you read them all, but it's kind of like me rehearsing an argument, so it's very useful for me to get some feedback from you about whether this kind of argument makes sense. But the notes are available on the DMU Commons wiki. Just go to wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk and look for the TECH3501 section. And if you want to add anything to this, there's the DMU Talk platform, which is talk.our.dmu.ac.uk. You can create a new topic, you can reply to an existing topic, whatever you wish. But I'll see you at the lecture.